as already said, my name is Mark Elster. I'm Patient Safety and Quality Manager for New Devon CCG. With me is my fellow partner in crime, Andrew Kingsley, Healthcare Acquired Infection Lead for the CCG. And what we want to talk to you today about is the highs and lows of setting up commissioned leg club service. Okay, leg ulcer service models across the country vary massively with regards to the quality, the care that's provided, the approach taken to patients. They're inconsistent. We have a lot of bias. In our own counties, we have some very traditional style leg clinics. We have some very interesting leses and deses with primary care, and we now thankfully have a very good working model around a leg club. So what we see is, in our own local circumstances, patient care will vary hugely. And what we want to try and talk about now is really the challenges and benefits, the snakes and ladders of developing a leg club. And this is really our journey. So what we want to do today, I'm going to take this off actually because it's easier to talk. The aim of our session really is to share with you the experience of developing a leg club, and warts and all, although we're not going into dermatology today, that's another presentation. What we want to try and do is inspire and help others to avoid some of the problems you will face in getting your leg club from aspiration to reality. So it really is the snakes and ladders. The thing that's really stuck with me through the whole of the 2 days is that everything we do is really simple. It isn't rocket science. We've heard from some amazing speakers this morning, some very simple messages. It's not rocket science. Setting up a leg club is not rocket science. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes commitment, but it certainly isn't complex. But there are things we need to consider. It is about getting the right people on board and climbing that ladder. It's really important that you get everybody focused on what you're trying to do, which is to improve the lot for the patient. What you have to do as well is avoid the snakes, because they do bite. And hopefully not there, but they do tend to try and bite you on the rump. So what we're going to try and do is talk about the snakes and the ladders of developing a leg club. So within Barnstable, what we saw, and the reason why we worked with the Leg Club Foundation to develop a club, was that we had a mixed bag of leg services. And within Barnstable itself, which is a town in North Devon, primary care support for leg ulcer treatment was generally patchy. It was actually quite poor, reasonably inconsistent, and therefore an equity of care for patients was affected. As a CCG, we were made to consider alternatives. The solution within primary care was no longer available to us, and we needed to find an option that would support patients appropriately. We had a gap. We had a very clear gap in our service model, and we really needed to think outside of the box and consider what we could do differently to improve the lot for our patients. We really needed to move that forward. So meanwhile, Mr. Kingsley came along, and we'll take up the story from a provider perspective.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Yes, so from a provider perspective, I was interested, as being a lead tissue viability nurse, infection control nurse, in trying to improve the lot of leg care. So we were keen to improve outcomes and knew it was entirely possible, knew the wonderful work that the Leg Club was doing all around the country, really keen to have a crack at that, but also looking at how we could possibly make it sustainable and how we could make sure we could really start something that was solid and that we could build on. Was very conscious that there was a continuing pressure on community nurses, and that's been a theme now for a long time. I mean, there's always busyness, but that pressure in terms of the community nursing service was just mounting and has been now for quite some time, and remains at quite a high peak, to the extent that as we look at different, particularly around pressure ulcers, when things go wrong out in the community, quite often as part of the root causes of that, or as part of the contributory factors, I should say, we find that district nurse teams or community nursing teams are often on red alert. You know, they've just got an awful lot of work to do to get the work done, to actually do what they need to do. So there's very conscious of the fact that there's continuing pressures on community nursing teams. And also, we're just continuing to get the grind of the hospital admissions and the preventative stuff. And I thought it was fabulous that Jackie Fletcher, last before lunch, was talking about preventable things. And I recognise the sort of things that are in there, the kind of the cellulitis and the diabetic foot amputations in particular. So this three kind of perfect storm thing really is hitting us. So I'm wanting to do something, and we know that the CCG at that time there was the Primary Care Trust, were also keen to look at different models of care. Could we do this better? And really that's your start point. If you can have people on either side coming together about the same time and going, I really kind of want to go here, but I don't know how to do it. And if you've got the Commissioner of Care doing the same thing, then you can start and have that conversation. It doesn't matter where that conversation starts. It could be on either side. But fundamentally, if you get both halves of this, commissioning and providing together, then you're going to succeed. So sometimes, you kind of get together and it's a bit like going over the top. You're getting very excited and a sort of slightly disheveled army, but you're mustering your troops and going forward. So how do you make this happen? Well, you end up with a working group, as is quite normal. You have your clinical and your management leads. You need commissioner. Importantly, of course, for the leg club, you've got to have those volunteer services represented. Now, I think what we didn't do, and what I'd like to do perhaps would be to do in the future, was to get patient representation. We had some sort of patient consultation, but it was relatively minimal, and I think that's an area that we could have certainly done better on in terms of the representation and how it would be like for patients when we suddenly change their care, from one thing to another. We then need to identify the key issues through this working group. And it's kind of like, what is the burden of the disease? And we kind of know that from the national studies. And all of those national studies are back from the sort of 80s and 90s. They are still actually remarkably relevant. If anyone's done recent prevalence surveys, you find that those numbers still approximate to being about the right thing, which is something in the order of 0.14% of your population has a leg ulcer, an active leg ulcer. We need to know how many we could possibly treat in this new model. Who of the people in this population could get to a club? Because bearing in mind, for those being dealt with by the community nursing service up until now, they're actually being dealt with in their own home. So how many people could properly access the club? We are thinking about how do we change patients' expectations, because they've been used to something, and even though it might be not as good as it could be, they're used to that, and they often have a relationship with the people delivering that care, which can be quite good, and so change is threatening, and we need to understand really and help people with their expectations about what we need to do. We need to think about how do we set up a volunteer committee, and we were certainly given advice about setting that up early on, because they've got to develop into a cohesive unit, because this is such an important part of developing the club. And there are some key people that you need to help germinate that important aspect of the club. You need to find a proper venue, and venues actually are really not that easy. And we found by looking at things kept stumbling, we kept stumbling because we couldn't find a decent venue. And it was only really at the last minute we found a place which had all the kind of prerequisites like better car parking, disabled toilets, disabled access, a separate kind of area for sort of cafe, and just kind of a working environment that could create a nice, happy flow within the club environment. So venue, big important. We seem to spend forever talking about transport because we're in a rural area with little market towns. And whilst we've chosen our largest town, our central town in North Devon, we've got this big mixture. Transport was considered to be almost somehow impossible to get over. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. We then need to say, actually, if we're going to do some form of pilot, have we got any money to seed this? Can we get this going? And how much money have we got to give, as a commissioner to kind of get this thing going? And what are the outcome measures we want to look at? If we're going to prove this case and commission it, we have got to put that solid base down at the beginning. You've got to think about it early on. What do I want? Healing rates, prevention of recurrence, patient experience. What's the financial impact and how are we going to measure these things? And those are very important when you're actually commissioning a club and trying to make it sustainable. So those are the things that you have to think about. So when it comes to snakes then, we talked about venues. So that is, as I said, in terms of the disabled access and the disabled toilets, how do you get your waste in and out? How do you discharge buckets? All the sort of practical things, but how have you got an area where you can be private if you need to do a fuller assessment where you've got to disrobe, or for a particular patient who is, has other needs and doesn't wish to be treated in open session. So you've got to think about how that venue looks and how it's going to work in practice. We've got to think about in terms of as snakes is, it's not that specialist nurses are snakes, being one. But is that who is going to be with you and how much, they can trip you up. So whether those specialist people are infection control, whether they're tissue viability, whether they're the back care advisor, they'll all be having something to say. And it's also the health and safety people, fire. You're going off-site. You're going into somebody else's social territory, and you need to be ensured that your provider, if they're an NHS provider, feels that they can deliver their service safely and effectively within this unit, and you need to be able to demonstrate that. So you can get tripped up and slide down that snake through specialist services. Again, transport, very big issue I'm saying in the rural areas, but I guess it's true all over. How do you get people there? And what is on offer for your people? Can you engage the ambulance service with assistive transport? Can you engage local charities or Red Cross? Can you get support money from the League of Friends at the hospital? And we've had lots of different ups and downs with this. But transport was something that I know most clubs have, spend a lot of time thinking about and working through. We also then had to generate volunteers, and you kind of actually, we're not that great at generating volunteers, I don't think, in the NHS. It's a growing thing for us. How do we engage with the population at large and our communities in a real way? And so it's very easy, if you don't get those volunteers on board, to actually get everything else right and leave that till the last minute, and just the whole thing just doesn't work. It really is a partnership. We've got to think also about the documentation and the governance as well. And the foundation, very good at providing stuff, but of course this is all another set of documentation and control. So you've got leg club documentation and governance procedures, you've got community nursing ones, you've got hospital trust, you've got GPs over here. How does this all blend together? How do we get a seamless care record? At the moment we don't. We've got it all in big chunks. And so it does take some thinking about how are you going to control all of those records? Can you do it electronically, which I'm sure we will be able to in the future. Lots of developments there, perhaps. But getting that documentation and governance right, because if somebody says, you've got volunteers looking at records, then immediately someone could easily pull the plug on you and say you couldn't possibly do that because have you had them checked out, and how are you controlling those records? So these are the sort of pitfalls and snakes that come across. We've also got to get the whole service and all of the people involved in seeing the benefits, and that really includes the patients, because you're asking for a lot of change and you've got to sell them this idea, this new future. There's no point in kind of just grinding away in the dark. You've got to be a bit show, about the whole thing. You've got to kind of have the strap line. You've got to do the marketing exercise. You've got to say, this is where we're going, and we're over the top together like Dad's Army. Got to see the benefits. And then you've got to get the staff on board, because a lot of the staff are often in the early days when there's no precedent, as that was true for us, around you, where you kind of know 2 towns away where there's a club and it's going great guns and your friends really like it and you've heard good things about it. When you're without that kind of support network, you're starting it from scratch and everyone's really worried. I haven't, you have people thinking that they haven't had their practice supervised for a very long time. I normally get on and do my thing in the dark. And I do a great job, but I do it in the dark. And in fact, what you need is you're going to bring them out into the light, and then you're going to have supervision. And that's quite threatening. But you need to bring the staff on board. You need to work out how you're going to staff that club. And you've got to get the managers on board to say, actually, this is not a bonus extra when you finished your work. This is core stuff. This is how we do stuff right now. So in terms of getting people to see the benefit, we've got to get over that kind of groupthink resistance. And patient resistance is also a big one, because people have been used and socialized into and kind of organized into a way of thinking. We've got to get them out of that thinking like, this is what happens to me, this is how I get my lugs done, I wait in and the nurse comes to see me and that's fine. And we've got to get over the staff resistance of, that's not the way we do it. We go out to people and you go, no, we're going to do it a different way and it's going to be better and it's going to be fantastic, and give them that real vision of where we're going. So there is this whole pain-gain thing, you know, and it's a real mixture between the two. And, you know, at the end of the day, great ideas do alter the power balance, and that is threatening within services, you know, between patients and, you know, and professionals. You know, it's a lot of challenging, and there's a lot of this kind of yes, but, and that's why you get these great ideas getting resisted sometimes. So you've got to really come up with some form of unique selling point. And you've, as I said, you've got to market this thing. This is an important step you're going to be taking. So, what do we do in order to, we talked and we kind of beginning to come to a stalemate. We couldn't get over the hump. We had the service side going, but you've got to give us more money. And then we had the PCT going, but we have no money. And yes, we want more money. No, we haven't got any money. But you've still got to do it. No, we won't do it without any money. And all of that kind of stuff. So we decided that we'd go on a visit. And frankly, that's one of the best ladders you can do. And we went to Worcester. And we came to the local club here. We went on a visit. And quite frankly, it was like going to a rock concert. It was all kicking off. It was fab. And I've never seen a series of managers who were very stern about money and service and all people haven't got time to do all of this extras and all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, we go into the club, and the journey up to Worcester, all the way up through the M5, is like, oh, I don't even do it. On the way home, how do we have one of those? That's fantastic. Going on a visit really is transformational. So I would say that that's a major ladder. So the ladders really, in terms of development of your club, or development of more clubs, is get the commissioners on board. Approach them. We are looking for transformative individuals who want to say, we could do this in a better way. And if you can say, we can do it better, and we can do it cheaper, and the patients will really do a lot better because of it, that's what we want to hear. Because you will find that in some commissioners, they've got a certain suite of expertise who understand that stuff, but not in all by any means. So sometimes that has to stimulate coming from one way, and other times it might go the other way. The Lindsay Leg Club Foundation, fantastic in terms of providing that support. That's what they're here for, to really show you the model, to make the connections, to help you with the governance and things like the documentation. A lot of the they've got so much knowledge through all of the clubs that are there and development over the last 20 years almost, that it's an absolutely crucial part of the ladders that really get you forward. And also, very important to have the local volunteer service. Now, most councils will have some form. This is North Devon Volunteer Services, and we have a couple of places on our other part of North Devon. We have which is just named after a river, and it's Torridge Volunteer Services. So we have two of those, and those are paid for. And the key thing is, in terms of you're starting from a blank page and you want volunteers, you want to go to somebody who can help to handle that for you and go, we need your help. Get them on board early, because that's remarkably helpful at kick-starting the whole process. Finding individuals that you know are either affected by leg ulceration who want to make a contribution back, or who are perhaps recent retirees, and it doesn't matter who it is, but who wants to make a contribution is great, but often those people aren't immediately evident to you, and so therefore you want to go to somewhere who used to handling volunteers and who may have a stock of volunteers on the shelf who said, actually, we know some people and we can get them involved, and that's going to be really important for you. We need a strategy for staff because we need to make sure that they're on board. You've got to work them because you're going to change their working practices, and you've got to make it so that this is how we will be doing this. This is core work for us. It's like the whole 6 C's thing. It's, it is what we do. It's at the heart of what we do. It's not an extra. It's not I'll do that when I've got time. It's what we do. So you have your strategy for staff. Interestingly, we developed a strapline for patients early on, because we said we went out to find patients through the existing community nursing caseloads in the town, and we said, right, we're going to have to help people think this through over a period of time as we're developing and through the pilot. And we said, if you're already receiving leg ulcer services through the community nurses, that we were saying leg care in Barnstaple is changing. So we use that kind of idea to say, it's changing, it's coming, but it'll be okay, but it's changing. And then, if people were taken newly onto the caseload, then we said, leg care has changed. So whatever they'd heard before, if they'd had some different experience before, or they'd heard that other people had it done in their own home, we'd say, no, it's changed. So it is changing and has changed, depending on which side of the, whether you were on caseload or newly onto caseload. And those sorts of rather simplistic things just help to get that idea of momentum of change going. And once you've got that, it's very much self-sustaining, because once the members arrive into the club and they experience what is being done all across the land in leg clubs, then they will start to enthuse about it to their, and it spreads. It's good care, and people get that idea. So it's self-sustaining. And also within the clubs, one of the key things is that not only is this about what nurses can do and volunteers can do for these people, and we know that there are great things that we can do in terms of nail care services and other add-ons that can draw in and add value, and that's all great. But we've got to get also people sticking to a proper wound care pathway, because it's about good program care, early assessment, early intervention with decent treatments, and getting people through and out and into well leg. But amongst those people who don't take that straightforward track, you will have people who will need to be referred on, and we've got to get those pathways there. So you need to have that quite clear. When do they go to vascular? When do they go to dermatology? And so forth. So that's about getting sort of right place, right time. So I'm going to hand back to Mark, who's going to give you a few results.
Okay, right, so what did we see then? What were the outcomes that we wanted? We wanted to look at quicker healing and improved healing rates. So, looking at the national data, the average healing rate for leg ulcers at 6 months, 24 weeks, is around 9%, depending on the literature guessed 2012, about 9%. What we saw within our club members was 42% healed within six months. So, without blowing our respective trumpets, 33% above the national average seen already. Okay, you could probably drive a bus through our research, but I think it's the information that really shines out from this. What we also want to see is once we get people healed and get people well, we don't want to see them again. So we want to reduce the occurrence of leg ulcer reoccurrence, and the national figures are approximately, depending on your research, around 46%. It can be higher, can be slightly lower. What we've seen in Barnstable is 7% of our members re-ulcerate. So 93% of our leg club members remain ulcer-free at 6 months. I will put a pause on there for a second, because that's really good, and that's something that is great for us. Great for the members as well. We have to talk about the pounds, shillings and pence. So the average cost for treating a leg ulcer at 6 months is around £696, although Andrew's told me this morning there's another model that's putting that even higher, so we're going to look at our model again. Hopefully our savings will be even more. Leg club members heal quicker and stay healed, as we've seen from the earlier slide. So what we've seen so far, if we took 100 patients from our leg club, we're looking at the quicker healing rate of around about £10,500 savings. We haven't added in the things like the reduction in prescriptions, reduction of antibiotics, different dressing choices, other factors to build in there. For those people who then don't re-ulcerate, approximately £26,500 saved. So you're looking at a reasonable sum of money. It's not large money in the great financial debt of the NHS, but it's enough money to interest your commissioners into doing something. It fits in with the commissioning models about care closer to home, local sustainable services, reduction in prescription costs, reduction in dressing costs. It ticks all the boxes. But the best thing is, it really supports members, and we've got one of our members here with our chair of the volunteer services at the back. Sin, can you just have a little bit of a wave, everybody? These are quotes from people. What we did, we wanted to check out exactly what the temperature was with our club members. So we asked them to do a little bit of a survey and a questionnaire. We've got a number of quotes.
Thank you, Mark. So really, just to conclude, that we know that leg ulceration isn't going to go away. We've got to get a grip on this thing. From a commissioning perspective, we need transformative care. The leg club will do that for you. It does take work, but as Mark said, it is not rocket science. It just takes a good bit of thinking through, a good team of people, and a bit of steady work. You can't get there in a flash, but just take it steady, work through the problems, and you will get there. And we will see better care for patients. Those patients are going to get better served. We know that. Everybody who runs a leg club knows that. And you can see the results that our club in Barnstable have managed to achieve. And that is not unusual in terms of the leg club around the country. That's what happens. We know that. So we've got to get some form of service transformation into leg ulcer services, and it's probably going to be a mixed model of care, and the Leg Club absolutely fits into that from our point of view. We get improved healing, we'll get less recurrence, we'll get happier patients, we'll get happier staff, and we'll get healthier communities. Thanks very much.